Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Let us begin with a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al divrei Torah. So we've been on a wonderful quest to discuss the blessing over various fruits and vegetables. And over here, we're going to go back to the end of our discussion with hearts of palm as it was in the Talmud. And then we're going to continue on. Where are we here? Okay. Incidental to this discussion, the Gemara is going to cite an additional halacha concerning the caper bush. About the caper bush, we were discussing what blessings are the fruits of the caper bush. And over here, again, there are three different parts of the caper bush. There's what you plant it for, which is the caper berry. Then you also have the buds, and you also have the shoots, which are edible. So the law of Arla we've discussed, which is that when you plant a tree, for the first 3 years that it grows, one may not eat the fruit of the tree. So Rav Yehuda said that Rav set a caper bush during the first 3 years of its growth, when it's Arla, outside of the Holy Land of Eretz Yisrael, where its fruits are prohibited by rabbinic law, not by biblical law. One throws out the berries, the primary fruit, because that is what's forbidden. However, the buds are allowed to be eaten because they are not the primary fruit that the tree is being grown for. They do not become prohibited outside of Israel. The Gemara raises a question. Is that to say that the berries are the fruit of the caper and the bud is not the fruit of the caper? How could you tell me that the berries are considered fruit and the bud is not considered fruit? The Gemara raises a contradiction from what we learned in the Mishnah that we cited above. With regards to the parts of the caper bush, over the leaves and the young fronds, one would recite who creates fruit of the ground. However, over the berries and the buds, he recites who creates the fruit of the tree. So we see over here that the young fronds, which is the shoots, and the leaves would be considered part of the tree. However, the berries and the buds would have the same status as the fruit of the tree. So how come the berries would be forbidden, but the buds would be permitted to be eaten even during the first 3 years? The Gemara responds, Rav's statement is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. As we learned in a Mishnah that Rabbi Eliezer says, the caper bush is tithed from its component parts, meaning when you have to take 10% of the fruits to give to the Levite, the tithe comes from all of the component parts, the young fronds, which is the shoots, the berries, and the buds, as all of these are considered fruit. However, Rabbi Akiva says only the berries alone are tithed because it alone is considered fruit. So Rabbi Akiva holds that the berries are the only part of this bush which are considered fruit. Therefore, when you take your tithes, you only have to take tithes from the berries because that's what's considered fruit. And according to Rabbi Akiva, it would also make sense to say that the only part which would be forbidden during the first 3 years of the tree's life would be the fruit, the berries, because that's considered fruit. The rest of it is considered part of the tree. The Gemara asks if that is the case, that Rav is saying this because he goes according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. He believes that Rabbi Akiva is the one who is correct. Why did Rav issue what seemed to be an independent ruling regarding Arla? Why did he teach this teaching with regard to the first the fruits of the first 3 years. He could have simply said something else, which would have more broad implications. He should have said the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And if he would say that the halacha is in accordance with Rabbi Akiva, that the berries are the only part of the caper bush, which is considered fruit, which we would have drawn then a practical halachic conclusion regarding Arla as well. We would know that whenever we talk about the caperberry, the berries are the only part of the tree, of the bush, which is considered a fruit.
What is Orla?
Arla is the prohibition to eat the fruits the first 3 years of the tree's life. So why did he not just say that the halacha is according to Rabbi Akiva? And then I would know that the berry is the only part of this tree which is considered fruit, both with regarding to tithes and with regards to the fruits of the first 3 years. The Gemara responds, if Rav would have said that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, I would have said that the halacha is in accordance with his opinion even in Eretz Yisrael, even in the Holy Land of Israel, which is not the case. There is a general rule, which is one of the big differences between rabbinic law and biblical law, and this is part of the beauty of the setup of the way God designed Jewish law to work, is that when you have a question, you have a more lenient opinion and you have a more strict opinion. When it comes to biblical law, we follow the more strict opinion. And when it comes to rabbinic law, we follow the more lenient opinion. So how does that play into our discussion over here? When it comes to the fruits of the first 3 years of the tree, the fruits of Arla, inside the land of Israel, that is a biblical prohibition to eat them. Outside the land of Israel, it is a rabbinic prohibition to eat them. The Gemara responds, had Rav said that the halacha is in accordance with the Rabbi Akiva, I would have said that the halacha is in accordance with his opinion even in Eretz Yisrael, even in the land of Israel. Therefore, he teaches us by stating the entire halacha that there is a principle. Anyone who is lenient in a dispute with regard to the halachas of the first 3 years of fruits in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel. So we have a lenient opinion. However, we do not go according to his opinion in the land of Israel. The halacha, the Jewish law, is in accordance with his opinion outside of the land of Israel, but not inside the land of Israel. So we do not always follow the opinion of Rabbi Akiva in this case. Rabbi Akiva holds that the berries are the only part of the tree which is considered fruit. The buds and the shoots are not considered fruit, and Rav is teaching us a very important thing. Rav is teaching us a rule. Rav is teaching us that inside the land of Israel, both the berries and the buds would be considered arla, would be considered fruit that you cannot eat within the first 3 years of the tree's life. However, outside of the land of Israel, you could. The Gemara questions this approach. If so, then let Rav say the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva outside of Eretz Yisrael. As anyone who is lenient in a dispute with regard to the laws of Arla in Eretz Yisrael, the law is in accordance with his opinion when we are outside of the Holy Land. The Gemara answers, If he would have said that, I might have thought that we're only applying this law when it comes to tithes. Tithing of trees is considered a rabbinic law, even in the land of Israel. Tithing of your produce and your wine and your oil is a biblical injunction. However, when it comes to tithing of trees inside the land of Israel is also rabbinic law. So a person, if Rav would have stated his statement as saying that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva outside of the land of Israel, we wouldn't know that he was talking about the law regarding the fruits of the first 3 years. We would have thought that he was talking only about the tithes. Why? Because here the Gemara answers in the middle of this paragraph. Had he said that, I would have thought that this applies only with regard to the tithing of trees, which even in the land of Israel is an obligation by rabbinic law. But with regard to our law, the fruits of the first 3 years, which in the land of Israel is prohibited by biblical, we would say that we should issue a decree prohibiting the fruits of the first 3 years, even outside of the land of Israel. Therefore, he teaches us that even with regards to our law, which in the Holy Land of Israel would be considered a biblical prohibition to eat, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva that outside, in the diaspora, one may eat the buds of this caper berry within the first 3 years and must refrain only from eating the berries. On the topic, we have a story. Ravina was going and he found Mar Barabashi who was throwing away the berries and eating the buds of a caper bush that was within the first 3 years. Ravina said to Mar Baravashi, and I don't know where this was. I think this must have been in Babylonia. Which is outside of the land of Israel, but we'll see. Ravina found Mar Baravashi that he was throwing away the berries and he was eating the buds of a caper bush that was Arla. Ravina said to him, what is your opinion that you are eating the buds? If you're eating them because you're in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who is lenient, then you should act in accordance with the opinion of Beis Shammai, who are the school of Shammai, who are even more lenient. As we learned in a Mishnah with regards to the laws of forbidden mixtures of diverse kinds. The Torah prohibits us from planting different kinds of trees or vegetables to create a hybrid. So Beis Shammai says that a caper bush is considered a diverse kind in the vineyard, meaning that caper bushes and vines may not be planted together. Beis Hillel says that a caper bush is not considered a diverse kind in a vineyard, and you would be allowed to plant a caper bush in a vineyard. Nevertheless, both those Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that the caper bush is obligated in the prohibition of Arla, that you're not allowed to eat for the first 3 years.
So, hybrid vegetables and fruits are not allowed?
You're not allowed to make them. To eat them is fine.
So, like nectarines and
So you can take a nectarine and plant it, but you can't. What a nectarine is made of an apple and a something or a plum,
a peach and a plum, is it?
a peach and a plum. So you're not
I
allowed to
think.
take the peach and the plum together and plant them together to create a nectarine. But once there's a nectarine, you're allowed to plant and eat and enjoy the nectarine.
Glad to hear it. I like nectarines.
Good, especially when they're cold.
So how do they get together? Is it like you employ a Gentile to hybrid it?
That's a good question. Are you allowed to employ a Gentile to hybrid it? I don't think you're allowed to employ them to, but you're allowed to eat it if they did. Same thing, we're not allowed to interbreed animals. So a Jew would not be allowed to create a mule, but you're allowed to buy one and use it.
So why did they disagree about the caper bush being a diverse kind or not? I
In a
mean,
vineyard? That is a very good question.
a caper bush is not like a hybrid, I believe, as far as I know.
Correct. So the question is, if you plant a caper bush in a vineyard, would that um would that forbid your vineyard or not? Because grain you're not allowed to plant in a vineyard. Vegetables you're not allowed to plant in a vineyard. However, fruit trees you would be allowed to plant in a vineyard, if I'm not mistaken. Um, yeah, I believe if it's considered a fruit, then you are allowed to plant it in a vineyard. But if it's not considered a fruit, then you're not allowed to. If it's considered a vegetable, then you're not allowed to. Then you're not allowed to plant it in a vineyard. But the Gemara is going to address this right now. Before dealing with the problem posed by Ravina to Mar Baravashi, the Gemara notes an internal contradiction in this Mishnah. This Mishnah itself is problematic. You told me that Beis Shammai said a caper bush is considered a diverse kind in a vineyard. Apparently, they hold that it is a type of vegetable bush, and therefore it is not allowed to be planted in a vineyard. And then you taught that both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, meaning Beis Shammai as well, agrees that the caper bush is obligated in the prohibition of Arla, so apparently it is a type of tree. So what is it? Is it a tree or is it a vegetable? If it's a fruit tree, then it will not be allowed to be planted. Sorry, if it's a fruit tree, then you may plant it in the vineyard, and you may not eat the fruits for the first 3 years. However, if it is a vegetable, then it may not be planted in a vineyard. However, you are allowed to eat the fruits for the first 3 years because it's a vegetable, not a tree. So how could Beis Shammai say that it is considered a vegetable that you're not allowed to plant in a vineyard, and at the same time say that it is considered a fruit that you're not allowed to eat it for the first 3 years? So he's contradicting himself. The Gemara responds, this is not difficult. Beis Shammai are uncertain whether the caper bush is considered a vegetable bush or a tree. And here, regarding diverse kinds, they act stringently, and here, regarding Arla, they act stringently. In other words, because we're not sure whether it's a tree or whether it's a vegetable, we're going to act with the stringencies of both. We're not going to let you plant it in a vineyard, and we're not going to let you eat the fruits of it in the first 3 years. So if that's the case, we see very clearly from here that according to Beis Shammai, the caper bush has the status of uncertain Arla. We're not sure whether it's Arla or not. It's questionable. It's uncertain. So, what do we do with a tree that we're uncertain whether the fruits should be forbidden the first 3 years or whether they should be permitted the first 3 years? Let's go. We learned the consensus of the Jewish law, the final law, the halacha. If there is uncertain Arla, if we have a tree which we're not sure whether its fruits are forbidden or not, so then it depends. If you're in the land of Eretz Yisrael, if you're in the land of Israel, it is forbidden to eat because, like we said, it is a biblical prohibition, And therefore, we go according to the most strict opinion. If we have a doubt, it is forbidden. In Syria, it is permitted. Syria was a land that King David was an area of Syria that King David conquered, and Jewish people were living. It did not have the same status as biblical Israel because it was not biblical Israel. However, because it was next to Israel and many Jewish people were living there, certain aspects of the laws, God bless you, certain aspects of the laws of agriculture were extended to Syria as well. We're going to learn more about those later. So in Syria, it is permitted to eat. If you're not sure whether this fruit came from a tree that was in its third year or not, then you're allowed to eat it. We are not concerned about its uncertain status, even though you don't know for sure that the tree that it came from has already passed 3 years. You're allowed to eat it, unless you know for sure that it's from a tree which is within its first 3 years. However, if you're outside of Israel and in the diaspora, so you're outside of Israel and outside of Syria, you're not the Gentile owner of a field may go down into his field. Congratulations, we have finished page 36a. And take from the arla fruit. And as long as the Jew is not watching him pick it, he may purchase the fruit from the Gentile. So you're not allowed to go in with the Gentile and have him pick the fruit. You're not allowed to watch him pick it. However, the Gentile is allowed to bring you fruit. And if you're outside his field, you don't have to know where it came from. You don't have to worry about where it came from, even though there's a high chance that it's within the first 3 years.
But if he tells you that it's within the first 3 years,
that's fine as well. So long as you don't see him do it, you don't have to believe everything he says. So if that's the case, that if there's something which we're not certain whether it is in the category of Arla or not, and you're outside of Israel and you're outside of Syria, you're allowed to eat it. And we know that according to Beis Shammai, we just learned that according to Beis Shammai, the caper bush itself is a question whether it's considered a tree or not. Then outside of Eretz Yisrael, one may act in accordance with the opinion of Beis Shammai, who hold that the caper bush has the status of uncertain arla, and therefore you should be allowed to eat even the berries without apprehension. So why was Mar Baravina throwing out the berries and eating only the buds? There is an opinion who says that we are uncertain as to whether this tree itself is indeed even considered a tree. And because we don't know whether it's considered a tree inside the land of Israel, you may not eat from it because we have to go according to the stricter opinion. However, when it comes outside the land of Israel, one should be allowed to eat any parts of the tree. So Mar Baravina could have eaten the berries without apprehension. The Gemara answers. The general rule that outside of Eretz Yisrael one acts in accordance with the lenient opinion in a dispute where within Eretz Yisrael the question is whether it's considered Arla or not. That applies in this case, where Rabbi Akiva expressed a more lenient opinion in the place where he was arguing. Who was he arguing with? Was Rabbi Eliezer. So if you have Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, who are both heads of the institutions, they were both great rabbis, and therefore their opinions are both considered acceptable. Therefore, we act in accordance with his opinion. However, when it comes to Beis Shammai expressing an opinion, and they're arguing with Beis Hillel, their opinion is considered as if it is not in the Mishnah, and it is completely disregarded. Therefore, Beis Shammai's opinion does not hold weight in this scenario when it comes to Jewish law, and therefore we do not take their opinion into consideration. So the most lenient opinion that we have, which is considered an opinion, is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, which is that the berries may not be eaten and the buds may be eaten, as opposed to Rabbi Eliezer, who says both the berries and the buds may not be eaten, only the shoots and the leaves may be eaten. Okay, now we're going to go to a different lens and a different angle, and keeping on looking in the conversation of the caper bush, we're going to look at this from a different lens, and we're going to also introduce some more rules. You guys ready?
So when bush and a tree are used interchangeably,
Sorry?
the words bush and tree are used interchangeably.
I'm using them interchangeably when it comes to the caper bush, because I believe that the official name of the caper bush is a caper bush. However, the question is, are we considering it, according to Beis Shammai at least, is it considered a tree or not? So I believe that the official term is caper bush, but I'm calling it a tree because we're calling it a tree when it comes to the fact, I'm calling it a tree because its fruits are considered fruit. But the correct terminology would be a caper bush, I believe.
Right, I'm looking at it now on Google.
Yeah. This is what it looks like. As they grow, they become more acidic. What parts of the caper bush are edible? Capers are harvested by hand as tiny green unopened flower buds, sun-dried and then pickled for use in Italian cuisine. If the buds are allowed to bloom, they eventually become crunchy berries, which are also edible, pickled, or salted. Even the leaves can be used in cheese making. Okay. We have a bunch of different parts and stages. So I believe the correct terminology is caper bush. I was calling it a tree because its fruits are considered fruit as opposed to vegetables.
Also sprinkled on bagels and lox.
Yes. The Jews and the Italians. The Gemara approaches this matter from a different perspective. Let us derive the halacha that buds are included in the prohibition of Arla from the fact that the bud serves as protection for the fruit. The bud protects the fruit. And the Torah says, when you enter the land and plant any tree for fruit, you shall regard its fruit as Arla for the first 3 years. So the Torah would have said, or should have said, just perio, which means its fruit. S is an injunction that doesn't have any real meaning usually. However, it is used to learn from it an inclusion. So the question is, what are we including from the word S over here? The word S is adding something. The question is what? S perioi is interpreted to mean that which is secondary to the fruit. So what is secondary to the fruit? That is the section of the plant which is protection for the fruit. So anything which is considered a protection of the fruit would also be considered arla. For example, if you have an orange tree, that is less than 3 years old. You're not allowed to eat the orange. You're also not allowed to use the peel to make zest or rind or marmalade, right? So the orange peels would be considered forbidden as well because they are secondary to the fruit. So when it comes to the caper bush and the buds should be considered arla as well and should be prohibited because the buds are protecting the fruit. And therefore, they should be prohibited. Rava said, 1 second. Where do we say that a section of the plant becomes protection for the fruit? That rule only applies specifically when this protection exists both while the fruit is detached from the tree and when it is still connected to the tree, like the example I gave of an orange skin, an orange peel, I should say. However, here, in regards to the caper bush and with the caper bush, with the berry and the bud, it exists when the fruit is connected to the tree, but is detached. But when it is detached, when you take the berry off of the tree, the bud does not come with it. And since the protection falls off of the fruit when it is picked, it is no longer considered protection. Therefore, you're allowed to eat it, and it's not considered a protection and secondary to the fruit. It's considered its own independent being. Abaye raised the challenge based on what we learned with regards to the laws of ritual impurity. There's a general rule that when it comes to ritual impurity, if you touch something, then what becomes impure is only that thing. For example, let's say I was impure and I touched my computer screen. The table that it's sitting on does not become impure. I only touched the computer screen. However, what about the stand of the computer screen? What do you think? You think the stand of the computer screen would become impure as well or no?
No.
So the answer is like this. It depends if the stand of the computer screen is considered connected and secondary to the screen or not. So since the stand of the computer screen is considered like part of the screen, right? When you go to the store, you buy a computer screen, it comes with a stand. And if it comes without a stand, you'll ask for a refund. And it's connected to and part of the screen, so it's considered one unified entity.
You mean if it's sitting on a stand or if it's actually connected to the stand?
It's connected to the stand. So let me
Okay,
show you a picture of a computer screen. I'll show you what my computer screen looks like. For example, this one, right? So this one is a great one to look at. Let's just look at the picture. And you see that the screen is connected in the back. Wait, how do we?
Well, the screen, okay, the screen is part of the monitor. So, and if the stand is also part of the monitor, then yes. But if it's like a little bit of a stand you put it on like a little bit of a riser or something like that, then it's not. The riser would be
That's a
like
good
that.
question. That's a great question. When it comes to a wall TV, right? So you have the bracket in the wall, and then you have the TV that attaches to the bracket. Would that bracket be considered as a secondary item to the screen, or would it be considered its own independent being? These are good questions that would have to look deeply more into the laws of purity and impurity, which we're going to get to later. But that is exactly the discussion we're having. Is the bracket considered its own entity, or is the bracket considered, part of the screen? So with regards to when it comes to my computer screen, so the stand is like one with the monitor, one with the screen. But when it comes to a bracket, a wall bracket for a TV, there is room to argue that it's a separate being. Okay, so with that introduction, Abaya raised the challenge based on what we learned with regard to the laws of ritual impurity. The crown of a pomegranate joins together with the pomegranate as a unified entity with regards to calculating the requisite size in order to become ritually impure. In other words, if something is below a certain size, it does not contract ritual impurity. A person who is impure can touch it from today till tomorrow, and it will not become impure because it's below the size. So that is the crown of the pomegranate is considered part of the pomegranate. Its flower, however, does not join together with the pomegranate in that calculation. From the fact that it says that the pomegranate's flower does not join, consequently, we see the flower is secondary to the fruit and is not considered fruit. So it's not considered food. And when we learned in the Mishnah regarding the laws of Arla, the rinds of a pomegranate and its flower, the nutshells and the pits of all any kind of, the rinds of a pomegranate and its flower, comma, nutshells, comma, and pits of all kind are all obligated in the prohibition of Arla. This indicates that the criteria dictating what is considered protection of a fruit and what is considered the fruit itself with regard to ritual impurity are not the same criteria used with regard to Arla, as is illustrated by the case of the pomegranate flower. The pomegranate flower is not considered part of the fruit when it comes to contracting and giving ritual impurity. However, when it comes to Arla, the laws of the forbidden fruits within the first 3 years, the flower of the pomegranate is considered prohibited, that you're not allowed to eat it. Therefore, when we come back to the caper berries, even if the buds would not be regarded protecting the fruit, when it comes to ritual impurity, they may still be considered fruit with regards to Arla and may be forbidden in the first 3 years. Rather, Rava said another explanation of why the berries would be considered prohibited, but the buds would be permitted. Where do we say that a section of the plant becomes protection for the fruit? Where it exists when the fruit is ripe. I guess that a pomegranate's flower remains even when the fruit ripens. This bud does not exist when the fruit is ripe because it falls off before the fruit is ripe, and therefore it would be considered a separate entity from the fruit. The Gemara challenges that explanation as well. Is it so? Didn't Rav Nachman say in the name of Rabbi Baravua, if you have date coverings that are within the first 3 years, and therefore they are Arla and forbidden, they are prohibited because they became protection for the fruit of the date. Now let's look at this. When do these coverings serve as protection for the fruit? Only when the fruit is still young. Nevertheless, Rav Nachman quoted Rabbi Baravuha as calling these things protection for the fruit and saying that they're prohibited as Arla, even though they only existed when the fruit was small. This indicates that in order to be considered protection for fruit, it need not remain until the fruit is fully ripened. So the question remains, why are the buds of the caper bush not accorded the same status as the berries of the caper bush? Why are the berries prohibited for the first 3 years and the buds are permitted? The Gemara explains, Rav Nachman held in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. We learned in the Mishnah that Rabbi Yossi says the grape bud, which is a cluster of grapes in its earliest stage, immediately after the flower is dropped from the vine, but they're still too small and have no juice, is prohibited due to Arla because it is already considered a fruit. According to this opinion, even the date coverings that exist in the early stage of the ripening process are nevertheless considered protection for the fruit and prohibited due to Arla. So he's saying the flowers, which anyways they fall off very early stage in the grape's development, would be prohibited. Therefore, according to him as well, the date coverings would be prohibited. However, the rabbis disagree with him, explaining that fruit at that stage, that young stage, is not yet considered fruit. Therefore, according to the rabbis, the date coverings and the caper bush buds, because they fall off at a young age, they would not be considered protection for the fruit and would not be prohibited due to our law, and that is why the berries are prohibited, but the buds are permitted because they fall off before the fruit is considered big enough. Should we go further over here or should we pause in the middle? I think we'll pause over here because the next one is going to take us 2 minutes, more than 2 minutes to get onto. So I think we'll pause over here by Rav Shimi of Naharda. Strongly objects to this halacha. I would like to invite you all to join us tomorrow. Where is this? It's a class about the destruction of the temple. This Sunday is going to be Tisha B'Av. And we're going to look at the Lubavitcher Rebbe's take on this. Quoting from a story in the Talmud. Everyone is talking about destruction, but who is talking about construction? What is the Rebbe's proposal for the national days of mourning? What is supposed to be our outlook on this as it comes to Tisha B'Av? Hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chaim. It's great to see you. Thank you, Zalman. Great to see you. Wishing you a wonderful day. And God willing, we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll try to make it tomorrow. I've got an early dentist appointment, but I'll try to make it.
Okay.
How you feeling? Feeling better? Don't sound
A
better.
little bit better, but yeah, a little better.
Well, stay
Wishing
home
you a
if you're
speedy
sick.
recovery.
Thanks.